Hello and welcome. You're watching France 24. Coming up after his funeral, tens of thousands file past the casket of Diego Maradona, the football legend who died Wednesday, to be buried later in the suburbs of Buenos Aires. We'll get a live update in this edition. Ethiopia's prime minister orders what's dubbed as a final offensive against the rebel province of Tigray, the prospect of an all-out assault prompting fears for hundreds of thousands of civilians. Burkina Faso's president re-elected in the first round, Marc Christian Kaboré garnering nearly 58%, an outcome questioned by the opposition and tarnished by a jihadi insurgency that prevented voting in some 1/5 of polling stations. In the next hour, the France 24 debate and the legacy of Diego Armando Maradona. In life and now in death, his legion of fans displaying fierce devotion to football's golden child, his ups and downs mirroring those of his native Argentina. How will Maradona be remembered? Tell us on Facebook and Twitter. #F24Debate. Hello everyone, I'm François Picard. A day of mourning on both sides of the Atlantic. For hours they've been filing into the Casa Rosada, the Argentine president's official residence, to pay a last tribute to Diego Maradona. The football legend passed away Wednesday at 60 of natural causes. These are live images from Buenos Aires after his funeral earlier. Right now, the lying in state, his burial later on the outskirts of the Argentine capital. Mario Sofos has more.
After a night of mourning throughout Argentina, thousands lined up outside the country's presidential palace on Thursday to pay tribute to football legend Diego Maradona. Bidding him farewell, some in tears, some chanting their national hero's name.
El Diego del pueblo, el Diego de Argentina, el Diego del país.
El Diego de la rebeldía. El Diego, no, tenés que sentirlo. No te puedo hablar 10 horas y no lo vas a entender. Tenés que ser futbolero, tener pasión, y ahí vas a saber lo que es el Diego.
Argentine President Alberto Fernandez arrived at the emblematic Casa Rosada in Buenos Aires to pay his respects to Maradona, who he has called the greatest of all. Emotions were running high on Thursday as scuffles broke out between police and some mourners who attempted to push their way into the presidential mansion to see their hero. The burial will take place at the Buena Vista Cemetery in Buenos Aires province on Thursday evening. In Argentina, Maradona will always be remembered for leading his country to World Cup victory in 1986, where he scored two of the best-known goals in the history of the competition, including the infamous Hand of God against England in the quarter-finals. Maradona, whose life was marred by struggles with addiction, died on Wednesday, aged 60, following a heart attack at home.
Let's get the latest from Buenos Aires. Declan McGarvey, our correspondent, joins us. So, in the end, the funeral taking place the same day as the burial.
Yes, that's right. This lying in state of Diego Maradona's body will continue until 4 p.m. local time, and then it's scheduled to end. And then the body will be transferred to a cemetery about 40 kilometers west of the capital city, Buenos Aires, where a private ceremony will take place, attended by the family of Diego Maradona, close friends, as well as old teammates as well, including the World Cup winning team of 1986. The funeral will take place then later this evening.
We're seeing a report that his former coach, who's been suffering neurological damage, now 82, they haven't broken him the news because they don't want to upset him.
Right, that is the Argentina's World Cup winning coach of 1986, Carlos Bilardo, a very close figure to Diego Maradona. Not only was he his World Cup winning coach in 1986, but when Diego Maradona took over the management, the coaching of Argentina's national team in 2008 and took them to the 2010 World Cup also, Carlos Bilardo was his right-hand man at the national team. They are very, very close. Carlos Bilardo is aged in his 80s. He is in a very fragile state, and they are not yet breaking the news to him. Diego Maradona was such a massive figure for all Argentinians, and of course a particularly poignant figure for certain Argentinians as well, and that includes Carlos Bilardo.
24 hours ago, Declan, you were saying just how much Maradona means to Argentinians, and those are real tears we've seen outside the Casa Rosada this Thursday.
Yeah, it's been displays of an absolute outpouring of grief, of passion, and of emotion, and lots of tears. I mean, one person saying as they waited to go into the presidential palace to file by the body of Diego Maradona as it lays in state, one person saying that Diego was a god, another saying that he's in the hearts of all of us, another saying that Diego is of the people, that he is one of us. This is having a huge effect on Argentinians. It's an outpouring of grief, and you can see it as they file by Diego Maradona's coffin as we speak. I mean, Argentinians, they're banging their chests, they're pumping their fists, they're blowing kisses. It's a display of emotion and passion. They're throwing football shirts onto at the foot of the coffin. A very fitting, in many ways, emotional and passionate farewell for Diego Maradona. He was so emotional and so passionate himself, and a fitting farewell for arguably the world's greatest ever footballer, and certainly Argentina's greatest ever son.
Yeah, Argentina's greatest ever son, and his fate being tied to that of his nation, something we'll be talking about in the next hour in the France 24 debate. Declan McGarvey, many thanks for that live update. With Addis Abeba's ultimatum expired, Ethiopia's prime minister has declared what he's dubbed the final phase of an offensive that began at the start of the month against the rebel province of Tigray. The international community, aid agencies, urging against an all-out push for the regional capital Mekele. Already, the UN estimates more than 1 million Ethiopians will need assistance as a result of the fierce conflict that's forced many to flee across borders. Andrew Hillier has more.
In the northern Tigray capital, leaders of the Tigray People's Liberation Front are now at the mercy of the Ethiopian army. On Wednesday, the government's 72-hour ultimatum came and went without a response. Tigray leaders have already made it clear they would fight to the end. In a statement, Ethiopia's prime minister said he had ordered government forces to make a final push for Mekele, adding that the army would try to protect civilians. But he also warned of no mercy for those who fail to distance themselves from the Tigray fighters. The government claims tanks and soldiers have surrounded the city for the last 3 days, waiting for Tigray leaders to surrender. The UN says the situation is desperate, warning that shortages across the region have become critical. This satellite photo shows motorists queuing up for fuel as the pumps run dry. Aid agencies say that the fighting has already displaced more than 1 million people. Tens of thousands have fled the Tigray region, ending up here in squalid camps across the border in Sudan.
Just to imagine if for everything, literally for everything, starting from your food, ending with your water drinking, ending just to go for the toilet facilities and washing your hand, for everything you depend on somebody else.
As the crisis deepens, the African Union has tried to mediate, but its repeated attempts to cobble together an agreement have been rejected by the Ethiopian government.
For more, our coverage begins in the Ethiopian capital. Maria Girth-Nukulesco is our correspondent. That ultimatum expired at midnight. What's the latest?
Well, so far there's been no information about the fighting in Mekele. According to diplomatic sources, earlier on Thursday, federal forces were about 30 kilometers away from Tigray's regional capital. With a communications blackout still in place in the region, it's increasingly difficult to verify and obtain any information about what's really going on the ground. Human rights organizations have urged all parties to the conflict to protect a civilian population populations. Mekelle is home to about 500,000 people, and the Ethiopian Prime Minister promised that all precautions will be taken to protect civilians. He urged residents in Mekelle to stay inside and to disarm. The federal police on Thursday accused the TPLF, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, of planning to massacre non-Tigrayan communities in Mekelle, and both sides to the conflict are accusing each other of planning to use civilians as human shields. Attempts for mediation by the international community and especially by the African Union have failed so far. The Ethiopian Prime Minister still refuses to negotiate with the Tigrayan leaders, saying that they are criminals. Many Ethiopians do stand behind Abiy Ahmed's offensive to remove the TPLF once and for all, as they say, but many others are also very worried about a possible bloodbath in Mekelle because they're still not able to reach any of their friends or relatives in Tigray.
Stay with us, Maria, because we're going to cross to Geneva now. Babar Balak is spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. Thank you for speaking with us here on France 24.
Thank you very much for having me.
The UN putting out a strong statement earlier saying that it cannot enter Tigray. It's being prevented from going in there to deliver aid. What can you tell us about what you have access to and what you don't at this point?
Humanitarian access remains an issue. What we are seeing and hearing in Sudan, where UNHCR is working with the Sudanese authorities, where more than 43,000 refugees have arrived from Ethiopia's Tigray region. Half of them are children, so we keep receiving them. UNHCR is stepping up its effort to support all these desperate people. They're crossing border points and arriving in Sudan's really remote location. So our focus in Sudan remains how to help and aid these desperate refugees. And
we're hearing that fewer people are crossing over. Is there evidence of them being prevented from crossing from Ethiopia to Sudan?
The information is very hard to verify in terms of what is happening on the other side. The information we have so far, the average that we have seen in terms of refugee arrivals since 7th of November, we have seen 43,000 refugees arriving. 3,000 has been the daily average, but the coming days will tell in terms of if there is any effect on the arrivals. Our call on all sides is to allow civilians to seek safety and shelter. And Sudan has been an example. Let's not forget that even before this latest refugee influx, Sudan was already hosting 1 million refugees, and this is almost a new chapter. And this region in eastern Sudan has not seen such refugee numbers in the last 2 decades.
The Ethiopian government putting out a statement that it is setting up a 4 displaced persons camp inside of Ethiopia. It's also put out a statement saying that there's going to be the opening of a humanitarian access route to be managed under the auspices of the Ministry of Peace. Now, the UN's humanitarian coordinator in Ethiopia tells the Reuters news agency she has no information on such an access route. Has the UNHCR been in contact with the Ethiopian government?
The call for humanitarian access has been there. And it's very, at this stage, as the fighting continues, and it has been non-stop, and people who are arriving in Sudan who have just left in a rush, many of them talk about hearing gunshots. We are meeting refugees who are telling us that they have been separated from their family members. So there's an effort in terms of trying to see, because they're arriving at different locations inside Sudan's very remote location, if they are at different points where we can help them reunite, but many are trying to stay close to the border in a hope that they will see their relatives and loved ones soon.
All right. I want to thank you so much for filling us in. Babar Balak, spokesperson for the UNHCR in Geneva. Let's cross back to Addis Ababa and correspondent Maria Girth Niculescu. So as you heard there, It's difficult getting precise information on whether or not civilians are being prevented from moving across borders.
Yeah, well, the latest we've heard about what's happening at the Sudanese border is that on Wednesday, federal forces apparently arrived to the border crossing with kind of megaphones and were urging refugees, Ethiopian refugees who had fled to Sudan, to actually come back to Tigray. And later on, we've had information that ever since there's been very few number of boats